Good evening, everybody. Can I ask members to take a seat? We'll begin. Thank you. Can I just draw members' attention to the late list, which is for agenda number, is it 6 and 7? Yep. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming tonight. I'm just reminded to ask members to be conscious of the fact that we're live streaming. Welcome to the members of the public and speakers tonight as well. So we'll swiftly move on to apologies for absences.
We received apologies from Councillors Waheed and Cosgrove. Councillor Charters is here as a sub.
Thank you. Any urgent business? No. Declarations of interest? Any public questions?
None received, Chair.
Thank you. And minutes of previous meeting, can I ask someone to move on second? Thank you.
Can I just mention the minutes? I wasn't here last time, and I did send my apologies, but it doesn't say so on there. Sorry, again.
Okay, thank you. It'll be corrected for the next minutes. Thank you. Right, so which brings us on to the next item agenda. I'd just like to mention to members that we're pushing some of the agenda items up because we've got some speakers and we don't want to keep them waiting. So the first agenda item is agenda 6. Yep, thank you. Can I ask members of the public just to take a seat, please? Thank you. Yep, thank you.
Good evening, everyone. The application before us this afternoon is a reserved matters application for 4 dwellings on a former quarry site in Leeds. So on the screen there is the site location plan showing the location of the site edged in red, just towards the bottom of the screen. Access is off Huddersfield Road. The application is before committee because the outline application was determined by the planning committee back in 2017. So it was considered appropriate that the reserved matters application should also come to the planning committee for determination. So on the screen now is just an aerial view of the location of the site. The brown patch at the middle of the screen indicates the former quarry, and the site is just off Huddersfield Road. You can see the area is surrounded by residential properties. So that's the site layout plan showing the layout of the 4 dwellings. So the matters before committee this afternoon, the reserved matters include the scale of the development, the appearance, the layout, and landscaping. So looking at all these matters in turn, in terms of scale, we are of the view that given the fact that there are just 4 units proposed and looking at the size of the site, the scale in so much as the number of dwellings is concerned is considered acceptable. In terms of appearance, there are 2 house types proposed. House type A, which you can see on the screen there, 3-story two-story property, and that's the floor plan for house type A. And then the second house type B, again, you have on the screen there the appearance and the floor plans. So in terms of appearance, the buildings will be finished in brick with slate roof, which is considered acceptable. And then in terms of the layout, as indicated on the site plan shown earlier on, the scheme is considered legible. The layout of the buildings is such that there will be no adverse impact on future and existing neighbors, so layout is also considered acceptable. And landscaping, despite the details submitted, officers have requested further details from the applicant, so a condition relating to landscaping is recommended if members are minded to approve the application. So in addition to the reserved matters, we have also considered impact on the character of the area and impact on the amenity of neighbors. So given the location of the site, we are of the view that the impact on the character of the area would not be so significant. It's quite hidden from view from Huddersfield Road, and the house design proposed is also considered acceptable given the pattern of development in the area. And considering the separation distance between the development and neighboring properties, it's considered that any impact on the amenity of neighbors will not be so significant as to recommend refusal. And taking all this into account, plus the fact that there is no objection from all relevant consultees, including the parish council, officers have recommended the scheme for approval, subject to conditions set out in the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now we have any questions from members of the council? Any questions for the officer? No? Okay, so then we'll move on to the speakers list. We have Mr. Mark Alexander. So just to give you a quick briefing, you'll have approximately 3 minutes to speak. The clerk will time you, and I think 30 seconds before time's up, she'll notify you. That's okay? So if you press the black button, then you'll be able to start. Thank you.
Hi. I currently live at Huddersfield Road, 649, which is a bungalow. Us and our neighbour, 651, we back on to the plot 2 and 3 with the, pardon me. Plot 2 is a 3-storey building, and the layout of the land is already metres above our property. Looking at this, what I've got now, is going to be upper floor is going to be 7 metres above us. We're going to feel like goldfish in a bowl. We've only been in the property 4 years, and we weren't aware of these properties being built. We was aware of the ones in the quarry, but not these 4. So we spent a lot of money on the garden because we weren't overlooked. Now we feel that all that is a waste of time, because if these go ahead, we don't think we can live there anymore. We're going to have to up sticks. It was our forever home. We moved from an urban area in Stockport, and we moved to what we think was a semi-rural, and we just think that's been taken away from us. We will be putting the house up for sale if these go ahead, as they are, but they're just too high. The upper ground level is 7 metres above us. I'm not sure how far they are away, but 7 metres, and one being a 3-storey as well. We are going to be looked upon. This is the worst thing what can happen to us. as I say, we will be putting the house up for sale if we go ahead as it is. Besides all that, we used to get deer coming down. They won't have anywhere to go. And other wildlife as badgers and deer, foxes, all that we haven't seen in the last 2.5 years. We haven't seen anything like that. Yeah, the first thing we found out about these is when they come and chop the trees down. We bought the property
30 seconds.
in 2018, and the first thing we knew about them when they come and chop the trees down behind us in 2019. We had no letter, we had nothing. So we are gutted, and we're very upset about the proposed 2 dwellings.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Alexander. Your time is up. Do any of the members on the floor have questions for the objector? No? Do we have the applicant speaking on it tonight as well? Or? No. Okay. So now we'll open up to the wider floor. If anyone wants to start discussion. Yep, Councillor Harkness. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. So, of course, this, well, I mean, obviously we've got this application and we've got the 33 coming up shortly, which we appear to be taking separately tonight. Obviously last time it was deferred because there were some changes. I just wondered perhaps it might be useful if we perhaps just outline a few of those, how this is different to last time, because you know, said there was quite a few changes needed before it came back. So yes, I suppose that's, you know, that would be the first bit.
Thank you. I'll pass it to the officer.
Yeah, so thank you. The applications were deferred at the request of the applicants last month. They said they needed some time to consider the pre-commencement conditions recommended by officers, and they have since come back to agree the pre-commencement conditions with us, and that's why the applications are back in before committee today. Thank you.
Would I be able to come back in? So,
Councillor.
in terms of numbers, because obviously this site has been, you know, I was first in 2012, and it predates me, and the talk of building houses in there has been for quite a long time. Now, it seems to be a bit confusing, either this report or the next one, where it mentions that one objector, I think, has mentioned that it's more than what was on the outline permission. So obviously 33 on this plus the 4. How does that differ to what was has been suggested in the past? I think that might be useful to the committee to know.
Okay, so for this smaller site, the smaller of the 2 sites, the indication on the outline permission was for 4 dwellings, and when the original application for reserved matters came in, the site plan indicated that they were proposing 6 dwellings, and that was what led to the confusion. So, but we since got the applicants to amend the plans, you know, to bring it in line with what was approved at the outline stage.
Any further questions from members? Yep, Councillor Charters.
Thanks. So, in the paperwork, it mentions that the developers will be putting back, I think, 59 trees. I know the objector there mentioned that the trees were cut down behind his property as part of preparation for the works. Do we know where those trees will be sited in terms of maybe protecting people's privacy in houses that do sort of back onto the development?
As set out in the report, there are conditions relating to landscaping. So they did submit some indicative landscaping proposal, which our tree officer and the GMEU consultant considered insufficient, you know, to come to a decision. So we have gone back to the applicant, and we've agreed that they will be supplying some further information, and part of the issues we'll be considering when the landscaping proposal eventually comes in will be screening of neighboring properties. Thank you.
Yep, Councillor Akhtar.
Yeah, I mean, Mr. Alexander has sort of obviously mentioned the fact that he will lose his privacy.
Sorry, we can't hear you.
Mr. Alexander has outlined that his privacy will be at risk. Can you explain to us in terms of, obviously there's the height issue, how far are the houses from Mr. Alexander's property, and will his privacy be jeopardised? Because I'm assuming there will be a fence behind the garden on the top properties itself, and how high will that sort of fence be, and how far the properties are behind as well?
Thank you. So on the site plan there, this will be the closest dwelling to the objector's property, and they are here, just about there. The objector, the distance from that property, that proposed dwelling to the objector's property is approximately 35 meters. So we've taken into account the fact that yes, there are differences in levels between the objectors of property and the proposed dwelling. But given the separation distance between the two, we have the view that any impact on the residential amenity of the objector in terms of privacy or overshadowing or overbearing effects will be minimal.
Any other comments from members or questions for the officers? Yeah, Councillor Gloucester.
Can I just ask, is the whole site in Greenbelt, or is it just part of the site?
The bulk of the site will be within the Greenbelt. So it's just the area very close to Huddersfield Road at the bottom there. That will be outside the Greenbelt, but the bulk of the site will be within the Greenbelt.
Yeah, Councillor Harkness.
Yeah, I suppose it's probably useful, because with being a ward member, that this site obviously has been around for quite a long time, and some of the previous proposals for the whole of the site actually was around using it as a refuge dump, and obviously a lot of residents at the time were very opposed to that, and there was a committee set up many years ago, and I have spoken to a number of us who were on the committee at the time, and there generally seems to be support for the proposals overall, but there are some little concerns around some things which I think is more relevant to the next application. So yeah, I just thought it would probably be useful to share that with members.
Councillor Davis.
Thanks, Chair. So, I mean, if we could just explain to us then what grounds they can build on this Greenbelt land. What are the grounds for them to be able to potentially build on this Greenbelt land?
As part of the outline application, the principle of development on the Greenbelt was considered, and it was resolved at that stage that there existed some very special circumstance to warrant the development. So what the MPPF requires is that where there is a very special circumstance demonstrated, then development can actually take place within the Greenbelt. Thank you.
Is there a follow-up, Councillor Davis, yeah?
Yeah, I'll just say though, I mean, okay, giving on Greenbelt land and then a three-storey building, you know, as well. It's like a double whammy, isn't it?
Bring in Peter on this. Yeah, I'll be all right, thank you.
Yeah, we've taken into account the height of the proposed dwellings, and a visual impact assessment was submitted with the application. When considering the impact on the openness of the Greenbelt, in this case, we are of the view that despite the fact that, well, most of the dwellings will be three-story, there wouldn't be any significant impact on openness. That has also been demonstrated by the visual impact assessment submitted by the applicant. So we are convinced that the impact on the openness of the Greenbelt will not be too significant as to warrant refusal.
Thank you. Before I bring in the next speaker, can I ask Mr. Alexander flagged up about badges and DAs. Can you confirm whether there's been sightings and whether they actually reside in that property area? Thank you.
So thank you. So we had an ecology report submitted with the application, and we did request some updating of the ecology assessment because it was submitted a couple of years ago. So the ecology assessment was updated, and the conclusion of the assessment was that the proposal would not lead to any significant harm on biodiversity. But that notwithstanding, we have recommended a condition to enhance biodiversity net gain on site, and that's all set out in the report. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Charters, then Councillor Hoban.
So just to come back on Councillor Davis's point, you mentioned that there was a special condition as to why it was acceptable to build in the Green Belt. Could you tell us what those special circumstances were?
Okay, yeah, so going through the planning history there, permission was actually granted for some form of development that residents did not consider compatible with the neighboring residential properties. And then given the fact that that permission had actually commenced, it means it could be implemented, and I think it involves using the site as a tipping ground. And then, so when the outline application was submitted, there was a requirement for them to demonstrate a very special circumstance. So that was one of the issues raised, as well as highway issues as well, issues relating to safety, given the number of trucks that the approved scheme could generate compared to what you have if it's residential. So the council agreed with the applicant then that, yeah, there were very special circumstances to warrant residential development on the site, and that it was on the basis of that, or that was one of the reasons why the outline application was approved back then.
So just to confirm, the reason it's being allowed to be developed on is because there was already permission for the waste ground that Councillor Hartness mentioned earlier, and that's been changed, and that's the special circumstance.
Yeah, as well as some highway safety issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hoban.
Thanks, Chair. Am I right in thinking then that we're not, what's wrong with these microphones, that we're not dealing with the issue of Greenbelt at this committee? That's already been done, and this is just for the houses.
I'll bring in Peter on this.
So you've hit probably one of the key points on this application in terms of, because it's a reserved matters application, at the outline stage previously, yes, the principle of developing on this site for housing has been established, and we can't change that now. In terms of what we can consider in this application in relation to the Greenbelt is the particular visual appearance of what is being proposed, and is that in keeping with the fact that it's in the Greenbelt. And as Abiel has already outlined, we've taken that on board, taken on board the fact of what the site is like now, what it has been in the past, and we do not feel that the development proposed will cause any significant harm to the wider openness of the Greenbelt in that respect. So yeah, to answer your question, we can't debate the principle. It's just the detail of the actual design of the scheme at this point.
Thank you, Peter. Any further questions, Councillor Davis?
I don't know, it's a question or a comment really, but that's the whole point that I've tried to make really, that the committee members at the time, I don't know who they were, whether there's any of them here today, but they would have considered it, and I wonder whether they would have considered that it was going to be a 3-storey property that was going to be put on there, so, you know, to give that permission.
Yeah, I'll get Peter in this.
So obviously I wasn't here then either, but the point is, no, they wouldn't have, because it was outlined. So at that point there would have been no detail of what the actual house type was going to be, and even if there had been, it would have been indicative. So now is where in reserved matters we can consider issues of the appearance of the dwellings and what have you.
Thank you for the clarification. Councillor Harkness?
Yeah, just to carry on from that, I think earlier you mentioned that previously there was a suggestion of having 6 on the site as opposed to the 4. Was the 6 also 3-storey, or were they 2-storey?
Yeah, they were similar in design as to what we have now.
So to confirm, a very similar height.
Any further questions from members? I just got a quick question. So on point 16.1 and 16.2, have they attached a drainage scheme that is relevant? A drainage scheme was mentioned. Has that been attached?
No, not yet. So we still, there's a condition attached for requiring the applicant to submit details of the drainage scheme. So that condition is not specifically on the recommendation before committee now because it's on the outline of permission. So we cannot repeat the condition. So they will have to discharge that condition before the development actually takes place.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions from members? No? Okay, so do members agree with the recommendations as outlined? Can I get someone to move on second? Move for approval?
I'll move it with the,
Yep,
as per
seconded?
the recommendations,
Yep.
conditions in 21, section 21, sorry.
Yeah, seconded, yeah. Thank you. All those in favour? I think that's unanimous. Thank you very much, which moves us on to item number 7. And I understand Mr. Alexander is going to speak on that again. So, yeah, but we'll take the officer. Thank you.
Right. So the next application is also on the box quarry site. It is the larger of the 2 sites as I go further north from Huddersfield Road. So that's the site location shown on the screen there. Again, the aerial view, as described previously, that's just the brown patch at the center of the image there, which is the bowl of the former quarry. And next slide shows the layout of the proposed dwellings, 33 dwellings in all, mostly 4-bed dwellings. In terms of the house types, we've got 4 house types proposed this time around. House type C would appear as shown on the screen there. Then those are the floor plans for house type C. House type D, the elevations there, and then the floor plans for house type D. The third house type will be house type E, as shown on the screen, and then these are the floor plans for house type E. So again, it's a reserved matters application, and the issues to be considered, just as we had in the case of the previous application, would be just the scale, the layout, appearance, and landscaping. Going back to the site layout plan, yeah, so that's an indication of the layout and the scale of the proposal. Given the size of the site, it's considered that the site can conveniently accommodate 33 dwellings without causing any significant harm to character and amenity. And as shown in the slides earlier on, the appearance of the dwellings will be acceptable. The layout, as shown on the site plan there, is also considered acceptable. And issues relating to landscaping will be further addressed by way of relevant planning conditions as set out in the report. Again, we have also considered impact on the general character of the area and the openness of the green belt, as well as any potential impact on neighbors' amenities. And we are of the opinion that the scheme would not be harmful to either the character of the area or the amenity of neighbors. And given the fact that there is no objection from any of the consultees, including the parish council, officers are recommending the application for approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from members? Councillor Charters, then Councillor Harkness.
So it's just in regard to point 11.2 in the report. It mentions that the development will be very visible from the public road. Am I right in thinking that most of the sort of concerns around overbearing would be mitigated by the fact that the developments are within the bowl of the quarry?
Yes, for the larger scheme here, the bulk of the development will be within the bowl, so it wouldn't be very visible from Huddersfield Road.
Thank you. Councillor Harkness.
Yeah, so all the properties of 4-bedroom, I would like to have seen a mix of housing there, which may not be within our remit. But I think I'm just going to point out 18.1, so where it's mentioned, so it's a large development, yeah. We seem to just be not accepting the fact that any affordable housing is needed on that site, which usually of a development this size, that would be part of the criteria, wouldn't it? And it is, yeah, it's a former quarry, but as we've mentioned before, it's part of the green belt, so technically there's a loss of open space. So then that would should we not be looking at 106 as well? But none of that is mentioned in the report, and it's just in the paragraph, just pretty much just puts away, oh, that's not needed. So could you just clarify why that's the case?
Yeah, Peter. Yeah.
Thank you. So it comes back to again that this is a reserve matters following an outline application. So at the outline application stage is where you would establish the section 106. And obviously again, as we said before, I wasn't here at the time, but I can imagine that the situation there was the fact that it was not a very viable site and therefore it couldn't afford to make contributions. And we can't revisit that as part of the reserve matters. So that's why we can't look at that. Just to address the particular point about open space, just because it's green belt doesn't make it public open space. And so that loss of open land, if I can phrase it that way, does not equate to a loss of open space in that sense.
Any further questions at this point? No? I'll bring in the speaker then in that case, and we have again Mr. Mark Alexander. So again, you'll have 3 minutes to make your speech, and the clerk will notify you 30 seconds prior to ending. Thank you.
Yeah, it was the first application was more worried about, but this one, I seem to remember a major excavation works on the far side, taking up to 5 metres of earth to accommodate gardens. And that's what I wanted to link this with. The first bit was, why can't you do that behind 649 and 651? Take 5 metres of earth to lower the plot. That's all I wanted to say about this one. It was to do it on one side, so why can't they do it behind where it matters, where people live? Namely 649 and 651 Huddersfield Road. I think it's just, I can't get my head round you putting a 3-storey house on an elevated plot above bungalows. And that's all I wanted to say on this matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Alexander. Do any members have questions for the speaker? None? Okay, so I'll open up the floor for questions to the officers. Yep, Councillor Charters.
I think it'd be helpful if we could get a response from the officers about what the member of the public has said.
Okay, yep, Peter.
So ultimately, obviously, as a planning authority, all we can assess is the scheme that's been put before us. So if the applicant obviously considers that they need to move some earth to accommodate gardens at one end of this development because of the nature of the quarry and to fit the dwellings and the gardens in, they obviously didn't consider that was needed in terms of the previous application and what have you. So all we can do is assess what we can't say, or we can't force them to remove land and what have you, and earth move in that way. And we wouldn't really want to encourage it. We only really enable it where it's necessary for the development to happen. So I understand the confusion from and the concern from Mr. Alexander, but ultimately all we can do is assess what is before us from the applicant.
Thank you. Any further questions for the officers? No. Councillor Fryer and then Councillor Harkness. Thank you.
Well, it's more of a comment, really. When I mentioned that this was on the plans tonight, on the agenda tonight, it did make my wife laugh a bit, because when she was on the council in 2010 on the planning committee, she was still discussing Burke's Quarry then. So it goes back a long, long way. And Burke's Quarry, there was a Burke's Quarry action group, and I think they were opposing the tipping of large amounts of rubbish into that landfill, and they actually preferred the idea of housing. So I think this is long time overdue, and I know I'll let Councillor Harkness say, but I would move it straight away. But I'll let Councillor Harkness have his say first.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Fryer. Very generous of you. Councillor Harkness.
Thank you. Yes, I think it was with Phil Willis, wasn't it, at the time? Yeah. So it goes back, right back to then. So yeah, so it's a long time ago. It just mentioned on 15.2 about biodiversity and a suggestion of a substantial amount of trees to be planted. So I'm just wondering if we were looking at approving whether that can be sort of a bit more specified of exactly what we want in terms of the biodiversity, because I think there was another mention about a biodiversity report, and I can't find exactly where it was in the report now.
Is that 15.2, Councillor?
Yeah, that was 15.2, and then there was another bit which I think the applicant said he'd rather have it in the conditions. So just making sure that we're addressing the biodiversity report is incorporated in the conditions.
I'll bring in the officer to confirm that. Thank you.
Yeah, there are relevant conditions to landscaping and biodiversity in the report. Our tree officer is actually in an ongoing discussion with the applicant in order to agree on the number of replacement trees that will be required. They've indicated on the landscaping proposal that they submitted that they will be planting about 59 trees, but which we thought would not be sufficient. So there is some discussion going on, and then we've come to an agreement with the applicant that the discussions the matter can actually be resolved by way of a planning condition. If we are not satisfied with the proposal when eventually they come to discharge the condition, then it means the development cannot go ahead. Thank you.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Councillor. So just before we move on second, I'll bring in Councillor Charters. Thank you.
So just before Councillor Fry and Councillor Harkness do move it, I do just want to go back to something that Councillor Harkness mentioned before, in that I am quite disappointed that there is a lack of sort of mix of houses, and especially in regards to affordable houses. Oldham should be considered as a whole as well as the individual neighbourhoods, and I think it's quite disappointing that there aren't more affordable homes for families from across Oldham who do need more homes, and I think that's something that we need to be looking at a lot more in developments. It's not a question, it is just a comment before we move.
Thank you, Councillor Charters. Would you like to come in, Peter? Thank you.
Again, just to clarify on that, I mean, ultimately it's not the case that we don't want affordable housing in this area. It's more a fact that because of the outline stage, it couldn't afford it. It wasn't viable to do so. We can't now require it now. In terms of the mix of houses, that is a valid concern in this application, but ultimately, again, we have to balance it with the fact that there is still viability challenges. It is a former quarry site. It's a very challenging site to develop, and sometimes we have to compromise a little bit on the mix we would like in order to still have a positive development that, as members have already mentioned tonight, is a better use than what could have been on this site previously, or has been on this site previously.
Thank you, Peter. I will move to the vote. It's been moved. Can I get someone to second? Yep. All those in favour? It's unanimous again, so that's fine. Thank you very much. We're going to move on to item number 10 now, which is the Westwood Medical Centre on page 53. I'll pass it over to Graham, who's the officer. Thank you.
Right, apologies for a slight delay there. As members say, this application, it relates to a site, the former Westwood Medical Centre on Winterbottom Street, but people probably recognise it more as being the site just to the rear of the Westwood tram stop. And anybody who knows the area will know the condition of the building itself at the moment. It's obviously been vacant for a considerable number of years. Proposal, as you'll see from the details, is to replace this with a 16-storey block of 120 apartments. The application submitted in outline form, but with the scale, the actual layout of the build in terms of the building on the site and the means of access sought for approval at this stage. So as I say, this is the site itself. The building, present building, is in the middle of the presentation, as you can see there. The access road where the little red dot is, coming just to the north of that into the site.
We're just making the presentation slightly bigger for all members to see.
Okay, make it a little bit clearer. Right, now the technology's sorted out. So as I say, this is the application site. So where the red dot is, you can see there, just to the left of that is the site itself. And the red dot itself is on Winterbottom Street as it then emerges at a signal junction onto Middleton Road. And this is just the red edge boundary of the site. Now the applicant owns the land of the building itself and the central area of the site. The area to the south of the site, which I'll show you on the presentation, an area of open space and existing tree plantings in the ownership of the council. So obviously if development was to go ahead, the applicant would need to purchase that land off the council. And there's a small area at the front of the site which is also owned by the Metrolink, by TFGM, which would have to be incorporated into the site. So this is a proposal itself for the building. Again, I don't know how much of the detail you can actually perceive on there. So again, in the middle of the site is the building itself. It's on a footprint which is larger than the existing structure on the site. The area between the building and the tram stop is an area of access and an area where refuse storage is being provided and bicycle storage as well for residents, with access directly off Winterbottom Street. As you can possibly make out, is the kind of grey area at the bottom of the presentation. That's an additional car parking area which will be provided on the existing area of open space. So in total, there are 28 parking spaces provided for the development. They've also indicated a small area of some spaces there which could be made available for drop-off for the school, which, as members may be aware, is also accessed from the site. These are just basically indicative, just to give you the idea of the scale, because the actual appearance is a reserved matter, so we're not actually dealing with that particular detail at this stage. Similarly, these are indicative of the internal layout of the apartments themselves. Again, if the outline permission was granted, this would have to be dealt with in detail at reserved matters stage. These just give you a presentation from an existing tall building that everybody knows well because it's just over there. looking towards the site. And one of the issues on this is obviously on the landscape. Oldham's not really an area of very tall buildings. However, there are tall buildings on the landscape. Most of those, the larger ones, obviously residential buildings of the 60s era, but also some of the mill buildings themselves are quite substantial. So in terms of landscape terms, they are a major element of the site. This is just giving you an indication of the relationship of the building to the Metrolink tram stop. So again, you can see it's in a very derelict state. It is visible from Middleton Road, and obviously highly visible from people using the tram stop as they enter into Oldham. This is looking down to the junction, so as I say, there is a signal junction there, which obviously not only provides for traffic emerging and entering and leaving the site onto Middleton Road, but obviously has to be coordinated with the tram movements through the tram stop. This is just to show you the area of open space. Photo was taken during early part of the day, and the large number of cars still parked on there at that stage. And these are to give indication of the area of trees which are around the site on the northern side. And again, I'll explain why all that is of significance. So in terms of the kind of landscape elements of the scheme, as I say, it's a very tall building, not unique within the landscape, but because of the topography of the area as you rise into the town centre, as we all know, the town centre is effectively on a ridge from that location. When it's viewed from the west or from the south, it would actually be seen against much of the existing built development in the town. And again, when viewed going down the hill, the bulk of it is reduced as such. Most of the existing development in that locality tends to be two-storey. These are the residential properties and also the kind of school buildings that are nearby as well. But in terms of landscape terms, it's considered that a building of that scale could be readily accommodated on the site. And as I said previously, the actual appearance of it would be subject to subsequent considerations. Obviously, there are benefits in bringing forward a currently developed site as well, which has been in that condition for quite some time. There was a previous approval on the site for conversion of the building to apartments, but clearly that hadn't been taken to further the development, further consideration. Just returning to this element of the access to the site, so when members look at the reasons for refusal that are being recommended, the first one of those reasons relates to traffic issues, if you like, but not in terms of the actual amount of traffic generated from the development. Obviously, Wendy will be able to comment on this if members have any further queries, but both your highways officer and Transport for Greater Manchester have considered what the additional traffic generation would be from this development scheme and are satisfied that that could operate through the junction quite successfully. In terms of car parking provision within the site, yes, 120 apartments, 28 car parking spaces as a maximum, but clearly this is a highly sustainable location, immediately obviously next to a tram stop, within easy reach of the town centre, with bus services running immediately adjacent to the site. And as Wendy again would tell you, we don't have any definitive car parking standards, but given that location, given the type of accommodation likely to be on the site, it's considered that it will not generate additional parking demand in the area that can't be accommodated. However, having said that, we've looked at the actual layout of the development that's been put forward, and in particular how access around the building could be obtained, and also in terms of servicing. So there's a proposal for waste storage, which is indicated, for instance, as being in individual bins, which is quite an unusual arrangement for a tall building. You know, having lived in a a high residential building myself. That's not a normal arrangement. And as such, the movement of those would undoubtedly interfere with the movement of people in and out of the site. The same could apply to deliveries within that area, and also where the additional car parking area is to be provided. There's an indication, as I say, for some provision for school turnaround within those areas, but it's unclear how that could operate successfully without any implications for the new residents themselves on the site. We are aware, particularly during school drop-off and pick-up times, that this is a very congested street. I actually regularly walk down it on a weekday, but that in itself isn't a reason. You know, you have to look at the impact of traffic generation from the development itself. You can't try to resolve an existing problem. So we're concerned about how traffic would be serviced within the development site, and that the applicant, although they've provided additional information during the consideration of the application, have not overcome that particular consideration. In terms of the open space area and the trees, which you can see in that part of the site, so these are another concerns on the development. The building itself is behind that bank of trees. It's at a lower level. In terms of what impact that would have, there's been quite a significant bit of ongoing discussion between your trees officer and the applicant's own consultants of how that can be achieved. The information we've had submitted is quite generic in terms of what it says. It meets all the standards. However, we remain dissatisfied that sufficient information has been submitted that would demonstrate that a building of this scale could be accommodated without in effect leading to the removal of all those trees. And that would be both in terms of the kind of foundation detail that would be required to accommodate a building of that scale, but also obviously construction. The earlier approval for just conversion of the building, or even a replacement with a two-storey building, it's not the same. It's difficult to envisage how a building of that scale could be constructed without significant loss of trees and the ecology that's associated with that. In terms of the open space, again, a potential reason for refusal that we're looking at, it's not been demonstrated by the applicant that there is adequate alternative provision being put forward or a financial contribution towards off-site provision, and some deficiencies in terms of open space have been identified in the open air, in the local area. The final reason for refusal similarly relates to a lack of information, which is again in terms of affordable housing provision on the site. Normally you would expect a viability appraisal to be submitted with the scheme. It may well be, given the type of development, that it could not financially sustain affordable housing. But in the absence of that information, we can't determine whether both local and national policies can be achieved on the site. So we have considerable concerns about that. As you'll see from the representation, obviously the people due to speak against and the local council are due to speak against, there are other concerns that have been raised. There are those in terms of residential amenity, some concerns in terms of safeguarding of children from overlooking of the school, but as members will see within the report, we've considered those issues and don't consider they are sufficient, sustainable reasons to refuse the application. So finally, it's just to explain that this is slightly unusual in terms of we're not actually asking committee to make a formal determination on the application today. The reason for that, and members will be aware, statutorily we're required to determine applications within a certain period of time. In terms of this application, that would be 13 weeks. However, as I've indicated, there are a significant number of issues that we've had to deal with on this application, and therefore we've not managed to get to a conclusion point before that date. When the council doesn't deal with the application, you have a right of appeal of non-determination to the Secretary of State. The applicant has submitted such an appeal, and therefore, in effect, it takes it out of committee's remit to determine. However, if that appeal is accepted by the planning inspectorate, the inspector will ask the council for its view as to what decision it would have made had it been still capable of doing that, and obviously that will be taken into consideration. So this is nevertheless still an important decision for committee to make. So as I say, it's recommended that committee resolve that it would have refused it for the 4 reasons set out in the report, and on that basis, thank you, Chair. I'll finish the presentation.
Thank you, Graham, for that robust presentation. I open the floor for any members to ask the officer questions. Councillor Charters.
So you did actually answer my original question, which was why did it not come to us earlier? The other question I've got is around the consultation, specifically the point that Greater Manchester Fire and Rescue have made around the access criteria for emergency vehicles. Was there any discussion with the developers prior to it during this sort of period of time between it being submitted and us deciding where this was discussed with them? Because obviously it's quite important that we have access for emergency vehicles, both for normal emergency, but also, I mean, I'm still thinking tower blocks of Grenfell and things, and fires are quite an important thing to think about when you're looking at high-rise buildings.
Yeah, there have been no direct discussions that have taken place. However, in terms of one of our reasons for refusal, which is about how the building is serviced, in the wider scope, that element of it is equally important. So how could it be, dealt with, for emergency services to get access to the site and within the site itself? So to some extent it's encompassed within there, but no, there haven't been any detailed discussions with Greater Manchester Fire and Rescue on that issue.
Thank you. Any further questions, Councillor Harkness?
Yes, so obviously it's been taken out of our hands to an extent, and we put a recommendation through. So if this had have come earlier, and you've mentioned a number of things which have not been answered, so would it have been reasonable to have deferred that in that situation? So if it have come earlier, would you say, well, actually we could defer that and look at those answers, or notwithstanding that, would you have thought, well, actually, even if you answer all those, there's still lots of other things anyway, because so even if we'd have deferred it, you still would have been a no, because it wouldn't have, you wouldn't have been able to address those issues anyway. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, obviously our approach is to try to work with applicants and try and achieve an agreeable outcome. So we get a scheme, quite often we get a scheme, when it comes in, it's unacceptable, and we'll try and work with them. But obviously when you get complex schemes, I mean, you'll know from some of the big applications you deal with, they've been in for quite some time before you get to a point of decision. So I don't think it benefits anybody to come early for a decision if there is a possibility that you can resolve those matters together. I don't think that answers your question.
Thank you. Any further questions? No. Okay, then I understand we've got a number of speakers today, so I welcome Ms. Sharina Khanum to speak. You'll have 3 minutes, and 30 seconds prior to the ending, the clerk will give you an indication. Thank you.
All right, okay, hello everyone. Sorry, I've not done this before, so it's new to me, right. To my left, I have all the majority of the residents. Some was unfortunate not be able to come because of childcare, issues, so they weren't, and some were at work. Okay, as a resident of Richmond Walk, I strongly oppose and object to the planning of the 16-storey apartments, which is going to consist of 120 flats. Already, as it is, the parking place is already limited. The building will further reduce the parking spaces and increase the congestion. At the moment, we have a traffic there of trams, we have public transport, we've also got the school using that same Winterbottom Street, and we've also got the residents. It's only one street which is off Winterbottom Street, and this is where the added congestion will happen. We also think the building will have an impact on the it'll be an eyesore. It's not going to be something that will be actually fitting in with the community. It just doesn't stand right with any of us, really. Residents will lose out on their development, which is that green area. That's the only green area we have, which is on Richmond Walk, where the actual children play. And if that green area is taken away, it'll cause mental, emotional and social problems. The quality of the tenants may compromise the safety of the residents and children who live there. Right to light, so how much clean air and light we get. It will also severely impact the residential value on the properties of people who have invested it from 1975 since they lived there. And I also think the plan is ludicrous and no thought has been put into it other than financial gain for the actual applicant. If this type of housing was required in Oldham, then I'm not sure why the flats on Cross Bank House and Somervale House on West Street Estate was demolished. Safeguard of the children will overlook the play areas of the children in the area and the children in school. The area is already will be used for gates, and the children will have nowhere to play as there's no park or anything in that area as they've been taken out of West Street Estate. Overall, the plans for this type of housing does not meet the needs of the area and would be greatly, and we will be disappointed if it is allowed. Our local councillors, community police, first choice homes, highway officers are all in acknowledgement with the very high volume of parking problems for the residents that are living on Richmond Walk on a day-to-day basis. And the other problem we have is a dead end, and if we have an emergency,
30 seconds.
Okay, ambulance or anything, they will not be able to get up there if this is allowed. If the application, yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Khanum. Do members have any questions for the speaker? No? Okay. We'll move on swiftly to the next speaker, which is the applicant, Mr. Spencer Fretwell. Again, you'll have the same opportunity, 3 minutes and 30 seconds prior to... 3 minutes to do your speech and 30 seconds before the ending, the clerk will inform you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Right, okay, so just to briefly summarise, as we've already heard, the site is currently derelict. There's a lot of antisocial behaviour that goes on site with drug use, homelessness, crime, arson. So we very much feel that developing the site would be to the greater benefit to address those issues. The site has previously been used as a medical centre, which would have had a lot of vehicle movement coming in and out of the site with short stay consultations at the medical centre. We feel that it's an ideal site for housing provision, close to the town centre, with the sustainable transport links for the commuter belt. The site topography lends it to be ideal for a high-rise development, with its location next to the flyover and the bottom of the hill, and it's not considered that overshadowing, loss of light or overlooking is not considered to be an issue. The levels of parking are considered to be appropriate, and the provision of a 1-2 bedroom apartments is also considered appropriate for the area. It is proposed to be a high quality apartments to provide uplift to the local economy and to support local businesses. Just to turn to one of the issues which was briefly mentioned about the fire, following the fire consultation, we explored the possibility of introducing a second site access, but due to the close proximity to the tram lines, we found that that was not possible. However, we did include a fire truck turning head on site, which was requested by the fire officer. In the fire report, the Greater Manchester Fire Department does go on to say that where a second access is not achievable, that they would consider to recommend the installation of a domestic sprinkler system to mitigate the lack of the second access point. With trees, the situation of the building is no worse than the positioning of the building, which has already been approved. The proposals are actually an improvement on that, given that the ground floor of this proposal will be occupied by car parking rather than apartments, which would otherwise be potentially overshadowed by the trees. Furthermore, we are proposing to take over the long-term sustainable management of the woodland to include seasonal pruning and maintenance, which was not associated with the previous approval.
30 seconds.
As regards to on-site vehicle movement, the proposed gates are set back, which was discussed at the pre-application stage, and for the duration of the day would be in an open position, and they're only there to provide extra security at night time. So we feel that addresses any issues with vehicle movement on the site. And just to quickly turn to open space, we have identified two sites within the local area where we would look to install children's playing areas, because it is clear that is something which is desperately needed in the area, but we haven't received anything further from planning on that.
Thank you. Do members have questions for the applicant? Councillor Harkness.
Yeah, so Graham, the officer, mentioned a number of things which he'd requested and said that we've not had the information on this, we need information on that. So why did you decide to go to appeal for non-determination rather than actually work with the council officers to try and address the issues around trees and so on?
Right, okay. It was the issue with the trees. It was proposed that we would have a site meeting with our arboriculturalist and the council arboriculturalist, and we suggested on 2 occasions a series of dates to facilitate those meetings, and we just didn't get any reply whatsoever. We also asked that the council arboriculturalist provided us a detailed statement of what they were wanting to discuss at the site meeting and what they considered to be the issues, because as our arboriculturalist has stated in the submitted documents, he does not consider there to be any issues which cannot be overcome, and so it was partly due to the lack of communication and failure. We were feeling that we weren't making any progress with the application.
Thank you. Can I ask the officer to confirm whether that was the case in terms of communication?
It was, in the sense that we did have a meeting planned, but unfortunately for myself, I then had a period of illness which intervened in that. But nevertheless, the conversations I've had with our trees officer is that he would require a much more detailed element of information to demonstrate that a building of that scale could be accommodated on the site, and that the details that we'd received were fairly generic. So they were to the standards you would expect, but there are the site itself, its configuration, the relationship of the land and the trees was such that we would need a more detailed element of that design. So you have a 16-storey building, the foundation design of that would have to be quite detailed, and his information was that he would not be convinced that that could be accommodated on the site without further damage to the trees beyond those that the applicant has identified in their report itself. So the impact of that would have been far greater. But yes, I certainly acknowledge Mr. Fretwell's comments in terms of there were a meeting that we were aiming to accommodate, but unfortunately other matters got in the way. But notwithstanding that, as you'll know from the report, that's not the only concern that we would have over this development.
Thank you for the clarification. Councillor Charters.
Sorry, it's all me today, isn't it? I do just have another question regarding the point 10 of our report, which talks about affordable housing. I know Graham mentioned that there was a lack of information from the developer about that, so I just wanted to know from Mr. Fretwell if there's any sort of response to that, because it says that no information regarding the viability of it was provided, so we can't make a determination at this stage.
Yeah, so the position that we took from the beginning of the application was that we were seeking for the affordable housing to be dealt with as a reserved matter, and that on the basis that we agreed in principle to the site, providing the required level of affordable housing, and for this to then to be looked at in detail as a reserve matter. Although, and we never heard anything further as to the appropriateness of that.
Chair, can I just come back on that to just ask...
very quickly, please.
Yeah, sorry, the report just says that this isn't a matter that can be dealt with at reserve matters, so I just wanted to know if the officer could respond.
Can the officer clarify that, please? Thank you.
It's not. And going back to the previous application that you were just determining, it was the other way round, if you like, that was a matter that should have been dealt with at outline stage, because you were now dealing just with reserve matters. The reserve matters are set out, the appearance, landscaping, layout, scale, etc. of the development. Principles of whether the development is acceptable, whether it can comply with policies, whether that's affordable housing, greenbelt policy or whatever, are ones for the outline stage. I would say that we did have a pre-application proposal from the developer. Many of these issues, particularly in terms of viability, were mentioned at that stage but weren't part of the formal proposal. I understand why, because obviously it would be a big scheme, and clearly the cost of providing that information at this stage, and also there would be some lack of clarity because obviously you don't know those costs at this stage. So I understand why that is in the place, but that doesn't alter the fact that we're dealing with the principle of quite a big residential development, 120 dwellings, but we don't know whether that would comply with national local policies and what the viability element of that would be.
Thank you. Councillor Davis.
Thanks, Chair. You made a commitment there, or was it a commitment to build a couple of children's playgrounds? Is that a commitment if this application did go through?
We outlined two potential sites within the design and access statement, and the developer is happy to develop those sites as playgrounds. Yes.
Thank you. I'm going to bring in the officer to clarify whether that commitment was in the report. Thank you.
That, as far as I'm aware, is not an element we could add regard to, because there's no detail of that, how that would happen, whether, again, the scheme could finance such a proposal. So it may well be that if you see the viability come forward, the actual costs of developing the site, it may well not be capable of providing that alternative provision. So there's a bit of a catch-22 here, and there always will be on schemes like this. But again, there's no clarification that, yes, we will do this, we will do that, but we have no details to show whether that would be feasible, and also whether the sites themselves would themselves be suitable for that, which is outside the want of this particular application.
Further questions to the speaker? No? Thank you. I'll move on to the next speaker, which is our ward councillor. I remind members that there are no time limit with regards to the ward councillor speaking, but please be conscious that we do have other agenda items as well. But over to you, Councillor Jabbar. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everyone. Of course, I'll respect the Chair's comment. My name is Councillor Abdul Jabbar. I'm one of the councillor for Coldest Ward, where this site is situated. I have to say, Chair, that I have never received so many complaints and objections about this application, certainly in the last 10 years, as I've done in this particular application. And the reason for that are set out in my submission to the application on section 8.3 of the report. Basically, lack of parking, lack of local amenities, and then overlooking some properties, and then the concern from the school and the children's centre. If I may, Chair, take this one at a time. And by the way, the objections come from people living on Richmond Walk, Middlesex Walk, Broome Street, Vale Drive, Middleton Road, Colwyn Street, and Widup Street. And I think there is a representative here this evening sitting in the hall from all of those streets. So if I can, first of all, start with the parking issue, and if I refer the committee chair to point 12.2 and point 12.3 of the report, you'll see from 12.13 that they're proposing 28 spaces, but actually on their site there's only 13. Now, if you look at the 13 spaces for 120 units of accommodation, that's 1 per 10 accommodation and 1 spare unit. And that's the issue that we've got here. I'll repeat this, Chair, that there's 1 car parking space for every 10 units and 1 spare. That's the 13. Now, they're proposing 15 car parking space. Graham, if you could please bring that open space on the screen, I'd be very grateful. This space, Chair, has been used by the local residents for play, for doing picnics and all kind of recreational stuff. And that's the only green space that we've got in the whole area. Now, I find it absolutely bizarre. The developer actually is using council land, which is an open space, and suggesting that car parking should be included there as an application without any consultation with the ward councillors, without any consultation with residents. If I may, Chair, draw your attention that this particular site is actually on a cul-de-sac. And as you know, as has been said by the previous speaker and also Mr. Dickman when he was speaking, that we have lots of issues with traffic going to the Children's Centre and Richmond School. And we met up several times with residents, and we proposed to create a car parking space in that area there that you see in your screen now. And it was refused on more than one occasion because people said, right, we'll put up with the inconvenience of the traffic, but we want to preserve our green space because it's so valued by the residents, particularly the young people. And I find it astonishing that this developer is actually proposing to use that as the majority of the car parking space for this 120 unit of accommodation. So I'm profoundly disappointed that this is taking place. And in respect of the previous speaker, the speaker for the applicant suggesting that there are 2 alternative sites. I've been a councillor for Caldas Ward for the last 29 years. I can assure you that in that area there are no other suitable space for developing children play areas at all. So I'd be very, very interested to find out where those sites are. The second point, Chair, that I would like to make is the issue around the highway safety that we talked about, the access and how it's very, very difficult. If I tell you that Winterbottom Street is a narrow street and both sides is a double yellow line, and what we're talking about is on that street having an access for 120 units of accommodation, going in there, out there, parking, service delivery, emergency vehicle, refuse collection. It is going to be an absolute nightmare for the school and the children's centre. Because I go on a regular basis, I have seen people argue, I've even seen people fight over parking cars on the middle of the road, parking cars on the side, parking car on a zigzag line. This is now, and we're talking on top of that, the current situation, we're talking about bringing 120 units of accommodation in this space. It's just not feasible at all. The third point I wanted to make, which was picked up by Councillor Charters there, is the relation to the safety, emergency vehicles and the access for that, especially fire vehicles, fire engines. You know, it's very, very important that we learn the lessons from Grenfell, where the disaster happened and so many innocent people lost their life. We must be very, very careful. We must be very, very satisfied that whenever we're doing new development, we take the lessons from there and make sure that something like this never happens again. The fourth point that I wanted to make was that in relation to the local facilities, There is no local facilities at all, play facilities that proposed. They're talking about it now, but we don't know the details of it. Coldest has the highest density of young people under 16 anywhere in Greater Manchester. And this particular location, we've got lots of family accommodation, and there isn't enough space there. Now, on top of that, we are proposing to add 120 units there with no additional facilities. The fourth point I would like to make is the actual appearance, sorry, fifth point, the actual oversizing appearance of this building. There's properties on Richmond Walk which will have directly be overlooked by this tower block. So that's a really important thing. And the final point that I wanted to make, Chair, is this, that we know already there's lots of issues with a Richmond School, which is the school opposite this building, and the Children's Centre. There aren't any green space in the school site, in school campus. They only have an artificial pitch. After that, there's nothing there. This space is there, the green space is there for everybody's use. And I've been there, right, where we collected a litter with the school kids and the head teacher and local residents. And, you know, they valued, we talked again to them, to the school staff and to the resident about doing even a turning circle there so that the congestion caused by school traffic can be reduced, and people were against it. Even the school were against it. So I do not see how this could be feasible when we already have that level of issues, number of issues there. I don't know how this will be feasible. I genuinely actually worry about it. And with your permission, Chair, I would like to add something to the recommendation. Obviously, I support the refusal and the reason for refusal. I would like to propose to the committee that you add a fifth item there, which is that the developer does not have any sufficient parking space on its own land. So that if you take out the 15 spaces that's on the green space that you're seeing on this screen, then they only have 13. And the 13 are the spaces that they're offering for 120 unit development on their site. And I would ask committee, please consider that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Jabbar. Before we move to questions to Councillor Jabbar, can I ask the officer and Alan to confirm if that recommendation can be included?
I think, Chair, it's probably better.
Yeah. Peter, yeah.
So it's not for Councillor Jabbar to as a speaker to make that motion. It's more for if a member of the committee were to agree with that, to propose an additional reason for refusal that the committee can then vote on as part of any motion
further down. Yep, thank you for that clarification. So we'll move on to questions to Councillor Jabbar, the speaker. Any questions? Nope. Thank you, Councillor Jabbar, for your time. We'll now move on to questions, not questions, sorry, for debate. Councillor Davis.
Thanks, Chair. The point that Councillor Jabbar made there about having more parking spaces, can I propose that we can have that put in there?
Do we have a seconder? Do we need a seconder? No? So, Councillor Akhtar, yep. And can we get clarification from Wendy? Yeah. Yep, thank you. If you can explain, thank you.
So I'm going to be very boring as usual, and I'll go through the whole process, the thought process. So first of all, I just want to, just a minute, clarify the number of spaces that there are. So the 13 spaces are the ones in the basement. There are 5 proposed for the drop-off area, and then through the barrier near the drop-off area there are 15, and then there are 3 visitor spaces closer to the building. At the moment we haven't got any national or local parking standards, so I can't refuse something or recommend refusal for not having enough parking spaces. the planning officers wouldn't let me do that, and we're in a very sustainable location here as well, so I've got to take all that into account. The reason that there is, and the other thing is that if we did have parking standards, there'd be maximum, not minimum. So we wouldn't say you have to have 120 parking spaces. We'd probably say that would be the absolute maximum that we would allow if we took everything else into account. So if it was in the middle of nowhere, maybe we would. Next to a Metrolink stop, it isn't necessary to have one space per apartment. So that's where I am with the actual numbers of spaces. The reason there is a highway refusal included is the way that they're configured. So taking into account the existing problems on the local highway network, there are barriers that will mean that people can't drive into a space without having to wait and cause congestion and then be able to drive out. The drop-off area for the parents at the school, regardless of who owns the land, isn't really a drop-off area. It's just extra parking spaces, which will lead to extra manoeuvres out onto Richmond Walk. The parking provision within the site for servicing vehicles, we've got barriers and gates again that will cause congestion when people pull up. Not really any area for servicing vehicles to turn around. So the reason for refusal, the highway's refusal, was the configuration, not the numbers, because I don't think we could recommend refusal for highway reasons for the numbers, but that's not my decision. And we do acknowledge the existing congestion that occurs in the area during school drop-off and pick-up times.
Yeah, Peter.
And just to add to what Wendy has said, I mean, I think just to first of all clarify maybe a point of protocol there. I think in terms of the motion has been moved, I'm assuming here, not simply to add a reason of refusal, but to also agree with the other reasons for refusal. Just I think we need to just clarify that in a moment. But I think as Wendy has said, it's it wouldn't be our decision. Ultimately, it's your decision as a committee if this was a decision tonight. If it was, we as officers have made our views quite clear that we think it would be difficult to defend that additional reason for refusal that's being considered at appeal. However, it is your decision, and I think that the other thing to consider tonight, obviously, is that we are not making a decision. We are making a recommendation that we will share with the inspector because the applicant has chosen to appeal for non-determination. I think if it is acceptable to the committee, maybe a halfway house maybe in this is rather to propose or to agree an additional reason for refusal, whether we could note that there is concern about the number of parking spaces, and we can share that with the inspectors as well. So it is not necessarily a reason for, or it would not have been a reason for refusal if we were deciding, but it is a concern that the committee wants the inspector to consider. So I just want to throw that in as a potential halfway house, if that guides you in any way.
Thank you. I know Councillor Davis wants to come in on that. Thank you.
So just to come back on that then, it's a catch-22 for us really, isn't it? Because if we approve it, we can say approve subject to more parking spaces, but if we refuse it, we can't put that condition in there, can we?
Councillor Davis, just to clarify, it's moved for refusal, the actual application. Yeah.
I'm not suggesting that you recommend for approval. I'm simply saying
Recommend for refusal.
Please. No, I'm saying the recommendation is for 4 reasons for refusal. The motion is to add a 5th reason. I'm suggesting that the 5th reason isn't appropriate, but we could agree a note on that matter to share with the inspector for consideration, but it would still be a recommendation for refusal.
Councillor Hoban?
It was on that note, I was just getting the clarification what Peter's just done, that's an unnecessary motion for us to deal with really now, isn't it? We've got enough reason to refuse the application without that, and it just kind of muddies everything up, doesn't it? So for me, I'd go to move for refusal straight away.
Thank you. Does anyone, just before we move to the vote, can I just receive clarification? Are members okay for it to be noted, or would you like it as a fifth recommendation? Councillor Gloucester. Right. So, are members okay for it to be noted?
Yeah.
Davis? Yeah. Anyone second? Yeah, that's fine. All those in favour of it being noted? Yep. Yep, Councillor Gloucester. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. I know that you're allowed to apply for planning permission on somebody else's land. I'm just interested to know what happens afterwards if it is granted. So, for example, let's put a scenario here that it goes to appeal, the inspectorate approves it, and that piece of land is still there. So if your parking spaces are still in jeopardy, basically. Has there been any discussion over this land with the council, do we know?
I'll bring Graham in on that.
Yeah, I know the applicant has approached the council, but I'm not aware of any subsequent discussions that would take place. I mean, obviously, in terms of how we deal with the application, if this was deemed to be an acceptable scheme, but only because they were providing the full 28 spaces, and it subsequently turned out that the council would not dispose of that land in its separate arm, then quite clearly there would be a condition that they wouldn't be able to comply with at that stage.
Councillor Harkness, I think you had a question? No? Okay. Right.
Motion's been put.
Yep, so the motion, yep, Councillor Akhtar.
Chair, can I move that we refuse the application, subject to the conditions outlined?
Yep, I second that. All those in favour? So all those in favour, sorry? Abstentions? Objections? I think that's moved for refusal. Thank you. Before we move on to the next item, can we just take a quick comfort break for members to refresh? Thank you. Hi, can I ask members to take a seat, please? We'll resume now. We're taking the next item. We're jumping ahead slightly to item number 14, which is Broadway, Chadderton, change of use from retail to a cafe. Retail cafe, yeah, that's one. Thank you.
Hi, this application relates to the change of use from a retail to cafe and hot food takeaway, including external extraction system. The application is sited on the southern side of Broadway in Chadderton, which is a road maintained and operated by National Highways. The adjacent uses are a Subway, restaurant here, and a dental practice here at 449. To the rear of the site is residential use. As you can see here, I've highlighted the extent of the unit, so it's the side of the building and it extends towards the back here, and there's a small access onto Long Lane. This is the front elevation from Broadway, and the unit is currently in use as a vape store, so its current use is retail. And the Subway unit is next door. You can see from this elevation there's a small access and small car parking area that serves some off-road car parking spaces for the Subway and current vape unit. This is the proposed floor plan of the unit. As you come through the front doors, there would be seating area, and towards the back would be the kitchen and preparation area. And this is just the front elevation again, just to identify which unit it is, and from the side you can see the extraction system is proposed, and these are just sections through the building. That is the end of the presentation, and the application is recommended for approval, subject to the conditions in the report. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's the shortest presentation on record. We'll move on to the speaker. Oh, sorry. Do members have any questions for the officer? Oh, move on to the
Chair, can I just ask a couple of questions?
Actor, yeah, as usual. Yeah.
just to clarify the extraction system, is that on the side of the building, not on the rear of it, whether to the side of the dentist?
Good question. Yes, yeah, you can just see it there. It is on the side of the, so it would be approximately here on the.
Right, okay, and then where's the Subway's extraction system?
Subway units here.
Yeah, but where's their extraction system? Is it behind the shop?
I'm not completely sure. I would assume it's on this side here, because that section
Right, okay.
there would be outside the red line, so.
Right, okay, that's fine.
It's likely to be on that side.
Right, thank you.
Any further questions? Thank you. We'll move on to the speakers. We have an objector, Ms. Lucinda Smith. Again, 3 minutes you have, Miss, and clerk will let you know 30 seconds prior to ending. Thank you.
Thank you. The junction of Broadway and Long Lane is one of the busiest in the area, and there is always standing traffic which backs up onto Long Lane and Argyle Road. And in addition to that, we have existing and continuing problems with delivery trucks and customers of the existing Subway cafe takeaway, because its car park is insufficient in size to accommodate delivery trucks or more than 6 cars. This is the same car park that the proposed new cafe takeaway will use, and it is not big enough already. The entrance to the car park is on Long Lane, and because of its small size and awkward shape, its delivery trucks are unable to park in it, and its customers can't be bothered to. So they park on Long Lane and Argyle Road, blocking traffic lanes, causing other road users not to be able to see oncoming traffic. They block residents' driveways and park on pavements so that pedestrians cannot pass. To add a second cafe takeaway will increase the chaos and the danger. This neighbourhood cannot take any more additional traffic. Customers park outside our houses. They leave their engines running whilst they eat their food, peering through our windows and throwing their litter on the street. If we approach them to explain the single yellow line, which restricts traffic, We are verbally abused, we've had eggs thrown at our windows, and I have personally been threatened by one who said he would put a brick through my window if he couldn't get his lunch. The immediate area has single yellow line restrictions which customers take no notice of, and we never even see a traffic warden. Our properties have been damaged by cars and delivery trucks mounting the pavement. My garden wall has been damaged more than once. My neighbour's pillar was demolished by a truck, and only last Saturday afternoon, a delivery truck reversed into a car parked on the road. The area is polluted with litter, with engine fumes, so the clean air programme have got no chance for Long Lane. It's polluted with food smells and vermin, all of which will be increased should planning permission for this be granted. We are horrified that the application requests opening times to 11 p.m. Why would this even be considered when the property is less than 20 feet from residential homes? We're not a main road, we're not an industrial estate, and to suffer further disruption right through the night is unquestionably unreasonable.
30 seconds.
Everyone is entitled to some peace and quiet where they live. If this is allowed to open till 11 o'clock, then other shops in the area will also be open till that time, and we'll be prisoners in our own homes. I beg of you on behalf of our neighbourhood, please let common sense prevail in your deliberations and refuse this application.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. Do members have questions for the speaker tonight? Any members at all? Can I ask Ms. Smith, which property is yours? Is it the one next to Subway, or is it the one next to the
it's opposite,
proposed?
I'm the very end house on the opposite side of Subway. And I've been there for 43 years.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions for the speaker? No? Yes, we have the applicant here tonight as well. So again, you have 3 minutes, and prior to the ending of the 3 minutes, you'll be notified. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Mr. Khalid. I'm speaking on behalf of the applicant, Mr. Nazir. Yeah, so we've put in the application for 451 Broadway for use as a cafe and takeaway.
Sorry, Mr. Khalid, can you just come closer to the mic so we can all hear you?
Yeah.
Thank you.
So we put in the application for the change of use to a cafe and takeaway. Next door is a Subway, which has operated for many years. The car park, it holds roughly about between 8 to 12 cars, according to the landlords. The car park had quite a few issues previously with water retention. This has been sorted out by the landlord, and most of the customers that we see, they all park in the car park. So that I haven't seen anybody who parks on the road, and we live and work around there, you know. Also, we've been in the area for 10 plus years. I had an office on Broadway as well, and the car park was an issue. It was putting people off parking there, but recently that's been sorted out. Our back history is that we've been trading for about 4 years out of the Ivy Mill, and we're looking for a unit. We were looking for a unit, a shop unit. This come available. This was a decent size. This is why we put in the planning application for it. We've been trading for 4 years. We've got a 5-star hygiene rating, a great reputation. You know, we want to create local employment, but we know our responsibilities as well. You know, we know how to keep the areas clean. We've had businesses for a long time. You know, we proposed to put bins in outside the shop, outside the exit of the car park as well. And we will keep the area nice and clean. That's part of our job. In regards to like vermin infestation, there was an issue at the back. The landlords have assured us that they've cleared all that, as well as, like I said, the car park issue. Yeah, that's where we stand. That's where we stand with it. And also, there's other.
30 seconds.
There's the Boughton Horses across the road. There's the Costco across the road. And where the lady has said that she lives opposite, there's no houses opposite the takeaway, but a bit further down on the right-hand side past the Costco. So there's more traffic caused by Costco on the other side than there is on this side. So that's my speech.
Thank you. Do members have questions for the applicant? Okay, thank you very much. Which moves us on to opening up to the floor for any comments. Oh, sorry, apologies. Councillor Shuttleworth would like to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just qualify what the applicant has said in terms of where the resident lives? She does actually live across the road from Subway, not on Broadway, but actually on Long Lane. And there are houses directly across from this particular location. To enable Councillor Akhtar to have his question answered in terms of the extractors for Subway, if we could ask the officer to put up the access image photo, please. Right, you can see Subway there, the green building, and to the right of that image, you'll see a gate or fencing. That fencing has been removed, which is exposed now the extractor fans for Subway. And there's been development taking place behind there, despite the fact that this is an application and it talks about when construction may start, the applicant has already started. And I did provide an image of the development, which is a glass-fronted one. Now, when I first looked at the planning portal for this, what it was showing along the side Subway was that would be a storage unit. Now, it would be the first storage unit I've seen that will be all glass-fronted. So I presume that that is the front of the cafeteria come takeaway. In terms of the car park, you know, I hear what is said in terms of 8 to 12 cars. Well, I don't know how easy it will be to get 12 vehicles on that road. I would imagine it would be very, very difficult to do. And if you look at page 95 in your pack on 3.1, and the very last comment on that paragraph, it says, there is a small car park. Now, I don't know how the officer defines small, but I wouldn't take 8 to 12 cars as being small. And I would be quite surprised if you could actually get 12 cars on there safely. I think it's also appropriate to point out that where these shops are, it's also a bus route. Long Lane is a bus route. And I've seen occasions where there's been HGV delivering at Subway and a bus gets stuck behind it. And that results in traffic building up on Broadway, which creates its own problem. Now, in terms of the consultations and environmental health, they say no objections subject to the imposition of conditions requiring, one of those is hot food takeaway hours. I don't know if anybody on the planning team has been back to environmental health, but if you look at what is actually said in terms of the opening hours, which again, as the resident said, came as a surprise to them because the planning portal did say 11 till 11 at one stage. Now on these papers it says 9 AM to 11 PM, 14 hours. So a question there, have environmental health been made aware of the opening hours? In terms of waste storage, taking into account that I believe what was supposed to be a storage room that could have accommodated the waste bins now appears to be a shop front, where will the bins be kept? That isn't in the report. Also, as you'll see in the title, it says cafe. What the report doesn't state is how many covers will actually be in the cafe. Because as you can imagine, there is a difference in the waiting times for somebody who is actually having something to eat in a cafe than going into a store and taking away a meal. So how many covers are there and how long is somebody likely to wait? This will all add to the parking problems. 12.2 says the unit will be refurbished with a shop front and extraction similar to the adjacent unit. Again, where is the shop front? Because a question has been asked of National Highways if they have any objections, and they say no. Well, they wouldn't do. They wouldn't object because there isn't access to Broadway from the car park. It just goes on to Long Lane. The traffic section, I'm looking at page 98 on 13.1, also says that they do not receive regular complaints about the use of this parking area. It doesn't say that they don't receive complaints. And I, as a councillor, have certainly had a discussion with a resident over the way people will park on the single yellow lines and go into subway at the moment. And you can bet the same will happen if this planning application is approved. On page 99 in paragraph 2, and that subparagraph 2 on there, it says removal of waste and waste materials. Well, if they've got a shop front on Long Lane, one would assume that what is down at the moment as the entrance to the former vape shop is going to be the storage room. And that's where the waste will be kept. And it's going to be dragged through the car park while cars are there. Where will the waste bins actually be kept at that particular time? If you look at page 100 and the plan that is there, there is a yellow line running alongside the properties on both sides. And the first road on your left after number 272 on there is Argyle Road, and the yellow line runs partway up there. Now clearly what's going to happen is that as it's a single yellow line, there is a time restriction for parking. So if this application goes through as it stands at 11 o'clock or 2300 hours, there's every chance that vehicles that are going to go there are not going to try and squeeze on what is a car park. We're actually going to start parking opposite 274, 272 and across the road in front of the residents' properties and others. And is it fair and right that you should have cars going into a residential area at that time of night, causing the disturbance that it could do? This is, as has been said, a busy area. Not only is it Broadway, but just if you turn left at the lights, you're actually at the M60, you're on junction 21. And you've got heavy goods vehicles coming down. As the resident has said, and I've seen photos because I've been to the house and discussed it with her, I've seen HGVs on images parked outside a property on yellow lines during the day. It would be unfair and unreasonable to throw more traffic into the area at the expense of residents. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Shuttleworth. Do members have any questions for the councillor? No? Then we'll open up the floor for discussion. Councillor Harkness.
Yeah, I suppose it's Wendy. So I suppose we've got to think about what is permission there for at the moment, which is a retail shop. Is it like and then transferring it to a cafe stroke takeaway? Would there usually be much significant difference in footfall of transport traffic in those circumstances from what is allowed already?
So that's how I've had to consider this application. If it had been a house, for instance, now, the reason for there would probably be a reason for refusal, a highway reason. But because it's retail now and it could be used as, say, a convenience store, so that people are making very short, frequent visits, it's the same sort of thing the fact that this is also a cafe sort of takes away the indiscriminate short-term parking. People have to find a longer-term legal place to park. You're much more unlikely to park on a yellow line if you're going in for a meal. So it's all that balance again. National highways haven't objected, but it would be the impact of any congestion on Long Lane, and what that would have on Broadway, not that it just isn't on Broadway, as the councillor suggested. So I think a reason for refusal for highway reasons would be hard to sustain here, but I do also acknowledge that there will be some additional short-term parking, but then you've got to balance it against, would it be any more than if it was a retail shop?
Councillor Holborn.
Thank you, Chair. It is, Wendy, I'm going to go back to highways again because it comes up, doesn't it? Because there is a slip road on Broadway, isn't there, just before this as well, from the houses set back. And obviously they're going to be affected, that part of Broadway. I find it hard to believe they've even said 8 spaces for car parking, because as far as I'm aware, I think you'd struggle to get one car next to Subway, the way most of it is sometimes. And it's not my area, but I do go past it. And I know that there's Costco, and I know that there's a Bolton Horses across the way, but it's another one of them occasions where we've got to think of the residents, isn't it? And so what nobody has mentioned is the inevitable delivery cars that are going to be in and out of here, with the online Uber and delivery and all them kind of things. Do they not get taken into consideration as well? Because that's going to be a traffic issue. I just find it hard to believe that this has been put forward for recommendation when there's so many, for me, so many obstacles to it, and it will have such a detrimental effect on that area. I was amazed when a Subway was put there, so to have another cafe put there, for me, as a non-resident, I find it quite difficult to comprehend.
Thank you, Councillor Holborn. I'll bring Wendy in on that. Thank you.
So the use of the delivery type operations actually reduces the amount of traffic, because you've got, so they'll pick up food for 10 customers rather than the 10 customers all going to the shop. So it, again, I've got to look at the more modern way that hot food takeaways operate as well. It isn't me and you and Sophie going separately in our cars anymore. It's not that I would go to a hot food takeaway. So yeah, it is a cafe as well. But again, the long-term parking will have to be, is more likely to be legal and less likely to be short-term indiscriminate nuisance parking.
Thank you. Peter, yeah.
I just want to clarify, because obviously a few times it's been raised tonight about how many parking spaces could actually be achieved on the front car park, and it obviously goes around the side as well. I'm looking on Google Maps right now on the imaging, and I can count 11 spaces on that car park. So I'm not saying it's tight. It's not tight, because it is, but you can manoeuvre and park 11 vehicles on that car park.
Well, I wouldn't, sorry, Chair.
Is it just a follow-up?
Yeah.
Yeah, Councillor Holborn. Yeah.
I wouldn't like to be the first car that's parked up for the other 10 to park behind me and then try to get out.
I think that's what Peter was alluding to.
Yeah, I can see the manoeuvring, how it would work. I say, I'm not saying it's not tight, but it is possible, and that's what we're working with. That's what's there now, and can be done at the moment.
Councillor Akhtar.
Peter's answered one of my questions. Can you clarify where the shop front will be? Is it at the front where it says, the picture that we got in front of us, where it says Wapes, rather than what Councillor Shuttle was alluding to on the side?
Yeah, from the plans that have been submitted, the shop front is on the front, facing onto Broadway.
Can I come back on that? I mean, obviously,
yep.
Previous councillors raised issues around parking, etc. Personally, I think this is one of the better applications that we've had for a takeaway. It's got its own car park. It's a detached, well, semi-detached property in a way. It's away from most sort of residential properties, got dentists on the side of it, and then there's some of the residential properties are rear to it, but the extraction fan is on the side of it, and it's fronting a very busy road. So the noise and traffic is already there, and it's not going to increase much more than what's already there, to be honest with you.
Thank you for your points. Councillor Charters.
So, sort of following on from that, and also in the opposite to Wendy, that I am a frequent user of hot food takeaways, as many might be aware, and I've been to that Subway next door a number of times, and I do get my petrol from Costco, so I am aware of sort of the traffic implications around that area. And like Wendy said, one of the things is that if you are going to a takeaway, and I mean, for me, even if it's a short-term thing, if you can't park outside the front, you would find somewhere legal to park, and there are spaces on further up Long Lane that don't have a yellow line that would be legal for a car to park in, with a short walk to the takeaway. But I think, yeah, the council outside made a good point. It does have parking spaces, and not a lot of takeaways that I'm aware of in my ward, in other wards, don't. They are on A roads. There's a number on Ashton Road, for example, and there is issues around parking there, but they are resolved through work with the council and through using off main road parking. So I think this is this does seem like a fairly robust application to me, and I think the sort of identifying where there's going to be a bin store and everything like that shows that they are taking into account that they are going to be good sort of occupiers of this area.
Thank you. And I think, Councillor Charters, you might be speaking hypothetically when you don't find parking. Is that correct, yeah? Parking illegally.
Oh, no, I mentioned if I don't find parking outside, I would find somewhere else to park.
Legally.
Not illegal parking, yes.
Correct.
You're right.
Thank you for that clarification. Any other members wishing to come in? Nope. We'll move to a vote then. All those...
Chair, could I just correct Councillor Akhtar? I think he said has its own car park. It doesn't. It shares it with Subway. It's not its own car park.
Okay. I'll come to the office for clarification on that. Thank you.
Yeah, the car park is shared between both the units.
Thank you for that clarification. So we'll move to a vote now. Anyone wishing to move and second the agenda?
Chair, can I move recommendation?
For approval.
For approval, yeah.
Yep, that's moved.
Chair, I'll second.
Yep, seconded. All those in favour? All those against? Abstentions? That carries. Thank you. We now move on to item number 11, which is Ronald Street. Change of use from a C3 dwelling house to an 8-bedroom house of multiple occupation and associate works. I'm bringing the officer. Thank you. Pardon? 18 bedroom. Yep, that's correct.
Thank you, Chair. In regards to this application, as confirmed there, this is a change of use of an existing dwelling house to an 18-bed HMO. It's located at 38 Ronald Street, and it was referred to Planning Committee by Councillor Ahmed in regards to the number of interest he's received from local residents having regard to the concerns of highway safety and traffic. As you can see there in front of you, this is location plan provided. The area edge red is the application site. It is located on the corner of Ronald Street and Goshall Street. The site is in an elevated position from Lees Road, which is accessed by Goshall Street. This image gives you a look at the building as it is now. Minimal external alterations are proposed as part of the application, with a lot of the existing openings to be used. The slide before you shows the amended layout. The accommodation is spread over 4 floors, with the basement used for shared facilities such as study area and washing facilities. The majority of the rooms are provided with their own en suites, but there are some shared facilities which are the kitchens and some shared bathrooms. This provides you some sections to show the level of accommodation across all of the floors. And that's the final slide. The application is before you with a recommendation of approval from the officers, subject to conditions in relation to the provision of secure cycle parking. Now, the cycle parking is proposed to be accommodated in the basement. However, we have no information in relation to the security of that in terms of locking mechanisms, and a recommendation of a bin store condition from our environmental health team. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions for the officer? Councillor Davis.
Thanks, Chair. When this was approved, did they look at, was there still demand for this type of property as a normal residential property? Did you look at that?
So in relation to demand of it being a residential property, obviously, as Peter's alluded to earlier this evening, is as officers we can only consider an application on what has been submitted before us. And in relation to demand for large properties, obviously there is a need in the town for all types of accommodation. We've seen a large shift towards more applications in relation to HMOs recently, and obviously given that it's a private property, it is a private-led development, and as such it's considered on the basis that it currently is a large-scale property that could accommodate a large family, and obviously the number of people that could accommodate the number of rooms is very, very similar. The scheme has been reduced in terms of its number overall to make sure that it meets amenity values in terms of its occupation, and that's why it's gone from 23 to 18.
Yeah, Peter.
Just to add to Matthew's response there as well, just to clarify, in terms of the policy against which we can assess applications like this, it doesn't require that there needs to be evidence that the existing residential use is in demand. So again, we have to assess all applications against the policy, both national and local, and that's not a reason for us to come into to look upon this proposal negatively, just because it's losing a large family home. And I think also we have to recognise that while there may be demand for such large homes, there is also demand for HMO type space in the borough, and that's always the difficulty we're going to have with an application like this, is that something will lose out, but it doesn't mean that it's not permissible or not appropriate.
Thank you. Councillor Harkness, did you have your hand up earlier?
I did, but Matthew's just answered it now.
Councillor Charters.
Thanks. So this might be a question that comes from the fact that this is my first planning meeting, but a number of the other residential applications we've seen today have got consultations with GMFRS and GMP, the Fire Service and Great Manchester Police. Sorry, I'm used to using acronyms. But this one doesn't, so I was just wondering why they've not been part of the consultation, because obviously a crime impact assessment would be quite useful to address some of the concerns that are laid out in the report.
So in relation to that, consultations with those bodies are in the proviso of terms of scale, and the scale of this development doesn't require that they are consulted. Obviously, given the scale of GM, they provide us with instruction in terms of when to consult them, because if you brought it all the way down to this level of development, they would be inundated, and obviously that would result in delays, and for both them coming back to us and then for applicants and residents.
Yeah, Peter.
And again, just to add to what Matthew's saying, ultimately the key reason is, as Matthew set out, but it's also worth bearing in mind that again with a HMO, particularly one of this size, it would require a licence, and so those kind of matters are also picked up through the licensing process rather than the planning process.
Thank you. Councillor Davis.
Yeah, just to confirm there, you said initially, I think you said it was 23 units that they wanted to have in there, and you've managed to get it to 18, or negotiated with the developer, I presume. The 18 rooms, or whatever you want to call them, that are proposed, are they up to the size, the standards? And the other question is, if it was going to be the 23, that were they not up to the standards? Is that the reason why it was changed?
So it sort of links with what Peter said there. So as a local council, we have to license these facilities, and our environment health team provide those licenses and provide guidance in terms of exactly what is required of certain sizes in terms of shared facilities and their own facilities in the rooms. Now, the original scheme made use of the basement as is before you here. However, it provided facilities that require outlook and light, such as kitchens and main living spaces like living rooms. So as a result, we've gone back to the developer and obviously advised them of the concerns that have been raised both by ourselves and environmental health, and that's amended the layout as you see before you. The facilities provided before you meet both the council's HMO guidance and the national space standards for size of bedrooms. So in terms of amenity for the occupiers, it is acceptable.
Thank you, Councillor Nadeem Iqbal.
Thank you. Ronald Street, because I'm one of the ward councillors, it's got a lot of issues with car parking. Can I ask, will the HMO have on-site workers? Has that been discussed? Are they going to have workers, or is it just going to run independent?
That isn't something that I've seen inside the application. However, I would suspect that there will be some management of such a large-scale HMO, and I would believe, from my understanding, that would be covered by the licence.
Peter, yeah.
Again, just to add to what I say, I mean, ultimately with a typical HMO, you wouldn't have someone working there, if you like, on a constant basis. As Matthew says, someone might visit occasionally, and that might be more frequent in a larger HMO like this than in a 4-bed HMO or something. But yeah, ultimately, it's not about employing someone to manage the property and being there regularly every day.
Councillor Iqbal. Yep.
So I sent some pictures in. The residents sent me some pictures of the cars parked between 5 and about 9 p.m. You received them. So if we say 4 workers, maybe out of the 18, 4 people drive, you're talking about 10 cars to be added on that street. I don't think so that street could handle that many more cars. Wouldn't that be an issue?
I'll ask Wendy to come in on that.
So there is already a high demand for parking in the area. That's not disputed at all. The car ownership levels for people who live in HMOs is generally low. So when I was saying before about Winterbottom Street, we've got different, if we had parking standards, they'd be different for flats and they'd be different for houses, because you obviously expect people who live in houses have got families and they've usually got more cars. So that applies to HMOs as well. So you've usually got single people or a couple in an HMO, usually not as affluent as people who own their own properties either. So the industry standard is people who live in HMOs generally are less likely to own a car. So that's how I have to view it. It's also in an established residential area with access to amenities within walking and cycling distance. If any of the future residents do have a car, they'll be required to find an on-street space in exactly the same way as everybody else who lives in the area. And if they can't find a space, they'll have to park further out. That's just how I have to view HMOs.
Councillor Akhtar, make it very quick, please. Thank you.
It will be a quick one. Wendy, you just mentioned the fact that when it's a HMO or apartments or flats, you sort of calculate the number of vehicles, etc., based on the number of apartments. So if this was like, for example, obviously it's going to accommodate 18 apartments or flats, whatever you want to call them. If it was a house, gets used as a residential property as a house, I'm assuming they'll probably have 15 bedrooms and the rest of the rooms will probably be used for living purposes. So what will your calculation be on the vehicle ownership of a property that has 15 bedrooms if it was used as a house?
So again, there are no national or local parking standards. So if that was that has been converted from a pub,
Yeah, it was originally.
to a dwelling, one dwelling, no parking spaces, because the the use as a pub would have attracted potentially more cars and parking. So the use of it as a dwelling was better because there'll be less. We haven't got any parking standards, but even if we did, and I said this earlier, there'd be maximum. So if it was a 15-bedroomed house, I wouldn't be saying you need 7 parking spaces, because anybody buying it would consider how many parking spaces there were for their needs.
Thank you. I'm conscious we've got 2 ward councillors. Can I just confirm, are you both speaking or is just one member speaking? Yeah. Both speaking. Okay. In that case, I think you both get 3 minutes each anyway, so... I'm joking. Yeah, Councillor Birch. Councillor Birch, thank you.
Thanks, Chair. The council is sick and tired of having to clean up waste that is being dumped by irresponsible people. That's a headline in the Manchester Evening News made by our Cabinet Member for Neighbourhoods in February 2018. Is this the headline in the news that we want to see again with the proposed 18-bedroom HMO development if permission's granted? It took residents in Clarksfield months to clean up the fly tipping and the council and raise the profile with volunteer litter picks and clean-ups that residents felt was needed through goodwill and improvement of their neighbourhood. Will this goodwill stop if we allow unsuitable residences to impact the area? The proposed development will impact the area on so many levels. Clarksfield has an active resident population. They're all passionate about ensuring that the area is clean and tidy, and it's as good as it possibly can be with the limited resources at their disposal. The Clarksville Community Group are mainly responsible for bringing the community together to deal with issues such as litter, fly tipping and the clean-up of alleyways, with the support of ward councillors and external projects like the Big Local. There have been several representations made in objections of this proposal to ward councillors from residents in the Clarksfield area. Their concerns and those of the elected members centre around the following points. Parking, as we've just discussed, is restrictive now, without the potential for an additional 18 vehicles near the property. There's double parking on both sides of the road, obstructing the view of oncoming vehicles from the numerous side streets on the road. There's a mosque opposite the proposed development, and many of the Islamic children in the area walk to the mosque for religious instruction each day. The number of existing vehicles and parked cars make this difficult for children to cross the road safely, and any increase in traffic or parked cars will only increase the risk of a road traffic collision occurring. Fly tipping and litter is a major problem currently, and this will only increase with the property of this size. And antisocial behaviour is already also a problem in the area, an area that is deprived, cramped and overdeveloped, and this development has the potential to exacerbate an already simmering undercurrent of resentment and hostility. There is already one 5-bedroomed HMO on Ronald Street, and it has caused issues around litter and antisocial behaviour over the last few months and tension amongst residents. I'd like to know from the applicants what provisions have been put in place for the vetting of people taking up residence at the property, and what provisions are planned by the landlord for making regular visits to the property to ensure that it's properly maintained and that waste and rubbish are removed in a timely and law-abiding manner. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Birch. Does anyone have any questions for Councillor Birch? No. Does Councillor Dean wish to speak?
Could I have a point of clarification, Chair?
Yes.
So when I've been off the council for a couple of years, but when I was on the council, on the planning committee previously, my understanding was that we were allowed one speaker for an objector, one speaker for an applicant and one speaker for a ward councillor. Because in the past I've negotiated with my ward council colleagues of who was going to speak on a particular application. Has that situation now changed?
As far as I understood, there is no set precedent in terms of the number of ward councillors that can speak, but I'll come to Alan on that.
I was just checking that, Chair, when you were mentioning that. Now, as far as I'm aware, the procedure's still the same, so it should only be one ward councillor who speaks, not more than that.
Right.
Unless they're from opposite political parties.
Oh. Right. I do apologise, Councillor Dean, for that error. I've liaised with the officer here, and that is correct. That we can only allow one member of one particular party to speak at any given agenda item. However, I can perhaps give maybe a couple of seconds of a minute or two if you want to confer with your colleague to pass on any information you'd like her to speak on.
Yeah, I just find it peculiar in the sense that certainly the previous chair certainly allowed 2 speakers from ward councillors, and I was the only councillor that actually made applications to speak.
I apologise for the error. The Constitution does stipulate 1 speaker per party per ward. Excuse me 1 second. Councillor Dean, I've sought further clarification, so I do like to apologise once again. Given that you have submitted your name in a timely manner, you are able to speak, and I think just for future reference, any ward councillor wishing to speak would need to submit their names prior to the meeting. So just bear that in mind going on in the future. So, Councillor Dean, there is no time limit, so you can go ahead.
Well, I'll try to be brief. Just to clarify some matters first. It's been mentioned that this property was a pub, and it was a pub, but it was a pub almost 30 years ago. And since then, it's been a family house, and that family occupied it, and I think they had 2 cars. So that's just to clarify that. And the reason that I want to speak is that I think this particular property will change the character of the local area. In general, I'm very supportive of HMOs, and in this area there's already 10 HMOs, small ones that didn't need planning permission. But also adjacent to this area, there's actually 5 of the largest HMOs in the borough. And those 5 have been very significant in size, but they do have staff, and they are monitored, and the staff control things particularly well. But this one doesn't have any registration. It does have shared facilities, and there are certain things that really do worry me. It changes this is one of the most congested areas in the borough, and it changes the whole character of the area, which is one of the planning reasons that I'm objecting to, in the sense that every single property within that area is a family house. But if this becomes an HMO, the whole character of the area and the whole reason and conflicts that are going to arise, particularly being only, 6 yards it is actually from the mosque, and also 10 yards from a madrasa, is going to really cause a lot of tensions, a lot of community tensions that I think and hope will never happen. But unfortunately, it could well do and be a source for that. So I think there's going to be some community distress and conflict. And one of the smaller areas that I object to this as well is that the refuge collection process is supposed to be in the basement. There is no space, there is no open space around this building. And also the bicycle store is supposed to be in the basement, which I find, in my view, totally unworkable. And I think those are some points that the committee can hopefully take. The other issue is the traffic situation, and it's not just parking. also within 50 yards of this proposal is Clarksfield School, that has a school population of almost 600. And in fact, one of the councillors sat round here, their child had a road traffic accident within the last few months. And it's already an area that is down for a 20-mile-an-hour area. It is a 20-mile-an-hour area. It's one of the highest traffic injury areas in the town. So it's the children and parked cars that are the problem. So part of the character of the area is going to be really affected because of the road safety issues for children in the area. And thank you, I'll conclude at that.
Thank you, Councillor Dean. And again, apologies for the confusion earlier on. Do members have any questions for Councillor Dean? Councillor Holwyn? Afterwards, okay. Any questions for Councillor Dean? No? Thank you. Then we move on to discussion. Any members, questions for the officers? Yeah. Thank you. Holwyn?
I don't know if it's a question rather than a statement. People that have been on this committee for a while will know that I'm a great fan of HMOs. And I just find it really strange that we're now at the point when councillors find one coming up in their ward, they come to this committee asking us to vote against it for all the same reasons that they asked us to vote for them when they're in our own wards. So while I'm not a fan and while I don't like them, I just found that quite ironic that people were here trying to get us to vote against one when they've pushed them on every other ward.
Well, we can't.
Could I just say, because obviously
No,
that is a political
Councillor
dig.
Dean, apologies.
It's a political dig at me.
No, sorry, Councillor Dean. But I will say I can't speak for previous applications in previous years, so we'll move on. Thank you. Councillor Charters.
So again, as a new councillor, I don't think I can be tarred with the brush of being in favour of or being against HMOs on the record, but I do think it's not polite to make aspersions against councillors when they don't have a right of reply. So on behalf of Councillor Dean, I think that's not very fair. On the other hand, though, I do agree with both Councillor Dean and Councillor Birch's points around the issues around in keeping with the area, and also the issues around sort of antisocial behaviour and crime. We have seen increases in antisocial behaviour around HMOs, and I think that they have raised very relevant points. And I know I alluded to that before with my question about a crime impact statement. I don't know if there's anything we could do to allay fears before any application is granted around this, but that's it.
Peter. Yep.
So I do appreciate that the issue of HMOs is very emotive. It also comes with often quite loaded misconceptions and what have you against occupants of HMOs. We're not here to debate that tonight. We're here to debate the planning merits of this proposal, and the fact that some may perceive some residents of HMOs as perpetrators of antisocial behaviour, littering, fly tipping, whatever it might be, that is not a relevant planning consideration, because it is not about the property they live in that determines whether a person does that. It's about their character and their behaviour. And you could have someone who owns a house who does just the same thing. And I think we have to be very careful not to go into that area that as a planning committee debating the planning merits. So just to put that out there as a warning, maybe if I can say, that we shouldn't really be entertaining issues of fly tipping, litter, antisocial behaviour in relation to a HMO, or even things like the management of the HMO when that is covered separately by the licensing process. It is simply whether we have to assume a well-managed HMO with well-behaved residents. Is that going to create planning issues on this street compared to what is there now?
I'll take Councillor Davis, then Councillor Ibrahim, then Councillor Iqbal. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Just a few comments, really. I mean, it seconds me, and I'll try not to swear, that we've got to approve these proposals because of government legislation. I think one thing we maybe could do is get an Article 4 direction. It may or may not make a difference. Probably they'd appeal it and probably they'd win, but we're treating people here like animals in little kennels. There's nowhere anybody can rest. It's just terrible. In every area of it, we're losing large properties, homes. I just wish there was something that we could do about them, but unfortunately, it's going to go through, and we don't seem to have much choice. And it's heartbreaking. It's terrible. The places are rotten.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. Councillor Ibrahim.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Dean has raised a number of issues. Now, I know Wendy's mentioned about the highways issue, so I won't go into that. Now, just to confirm, I know it's in the recommendation, so it's for the officers, just to confirm, the bike storage and the bin and refuse collections and the storage space, that would have to be agreed before anything else, even depending on which way we go with the vote. It would all have to be agreed and approved before anything else gets agreed at a further stage. Is that correct?
So in relation to the bike store, the proposal is there to provide it with it internally, which is considered to be a more acceptable solution than externally. However, they haven't given us details of the safe locking of them, because obviously there's 18 residents all living together. You're not going to leave it unlocked. It needs something permanent to provide it to be safe, i.e. locking it to the ground. And in relation to the bins, the conditions there to make sure that we understand how, where and how that's going to be managed, and that comes from our environmental health section. So, and both would have to be agreed before the facility can come into use, if the committee is minded to approve it, subject to those conditions.
Thank you. Councillor Iqbal.
Right, just in the last 6 months, we've had 2 other HMOs in Waterhead approved, one 18-bed, one about 12-bed. Where do we draw the line with this? Because now you're going to approve this one, for example. This is 18-bed as well. I don't know, the question is, do you guys look at what's been approved? Is there a number, limit, or do you just go by case?
Yep. Peter, yep.
Okay, so ultimately the policy at the moment does not require any limit on terms of a maximum number of HMOs in a given area, and therefore we can't bring that directly into the consideration. What we can consider is in terms of the cumulative impact on the local character of the area, because that's what the policy refers to, things like the local character of the area, the residential and workplace amenity of current and neighbouring occupants, as well as the traffic levels and safety of the road that we've talked about. The issue, I suppose, ultimately is that while it may feel like having 3 large HMOs in that area is a lot, numbers terms it's not. In terms of percentage of the properties in that area, it's not. And the challenge I suppose we're facing in relation to HMOs across the borough is that perception of concern about proliferation of HMOs, but the stats show that actually very few of our households are actually HMOs across the borough and ward by ward. And so in terms of the issues you're raising going forward, the only way that we could potentially restrict HMOs more, as Councillor Davis referred to before, is by introducing an Article 4 direction. And that removes permitted development rights, and it allows us to put more policies in place to potentially restrict and maybe, as you say, put a limit on a number or a percentage of properties in a given area that can be HMOs. But to introduce that Article 4 direction, there needs to be evidence of an issue. And the bottom line is, at this point in time, in any part of Oldham, on the information we have about the number of HMOs and how they're clustered, there is not an issue. And that's ultimately where we have to base it from. I understand perceptions, but we have to deal with hard facts.
Don't think the mic likes me today. Any further comments, Councillor Charters?
Yeah, so just to come back to that point that Peter's just made around the character of the area, this is a family area, and a lot of the objections do state this. And one of the actual supporting statements, I think, actually does make a relatively good objection in that there's a serious shortage of affordable housing in this area more generally, and specifically for people with young families. This isn't a development for people with young families. This isn't a development for families and people who... This is a development for single people, 18 single people to move into a home together. That's not in keeping with the area, not in keeping with the character of the area. So I think that in itself is a good enough reason, in my opinion, to reject. But obviously I know that the officers have different opinions on that.
Peter, yep.
And again, just to obviously appreciate that concern and that view, but just to come back on the issue of need, yes, there is a need for more affordable, more, if you like, lower priced family housing. There is also a need for HMO accommodation in the borough, and that's the difficulty we face.
Any further questions or comments from members? Yep. Can I ask the officers to clarify what would happen if we go against officers' recommendation and move for refusal?
Okay, so obviously, first of all, we would need a clear reason for refusal to be put forward by the person putting forward the motion. You know, what is the clear basis upon which, the planning basis upon which you would refuse permission, linking to our policies and what have you. Obviously, if that motion carried and therefore we refuse this application, it's then potential for the applicant to appeal, and that's where the reason for refusal is so key, because if an inspector at appeal considers that our reason for refusal is unreasonable, there is potential for costs to be awarded against the council. And I think, and again, that's why I've clarified tonight about certain issues are not planning issues, and they would not be our justifiable and reasons for refusal. That helps.
Thank you, Peter. So move on then. Would anyone like to move the agenda item? So, yep, Councillor Davis.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I just want to come out with a comment on that, the reasons for refusal if it goes to the inspector. Now, to me, okay, we've got two ways of going at it. If it was refused, if we come up with reasonable reasons, then and the inspector does overturn it and go with the planning person who's put the applicant with them. But we have to give reasonable reasons. So it's two things. We either get it refused, the ones that did want it refused, and if people did, or we do get it approved, but we don't get costs. So there's two ways of looking at that one, isn't there?
Peter.
If the reasons that are put forward are reasonable, yes, but obviously I can't comment on that until a reason is put forward as a motion to advise for myself and for Alan to advise you as a committee on whether we consider them to be appropriate reasons for refusal.
Councillor Akhtar.
Chair, I mean, I'm not a great fan of HMOs, but obviously in terms of what we've got in front of us and the reasons that the officers have outlined in terms of why we should approve it. Personally, I mean, I live on a street where we've got large family houses, and each house has 4 or 5 cars. And a dwelling of this size, if it's used as a family home, I think it could attract up to about 10 cars, and that's not going to alleviate the traffic issues that you might have in that particular area, and all areas do, to be honest with you. And with a heavy heart, I'm minded to move the officer's recommendation, but reluctantly, to be honest with you.
Any further comments from members? Right, so it's been moved. I'll second that. All those in favour? All those against? Abstentions? Can we have the vote, please? Thank you. We'll do that again. All those in favour of the motion? Sorry, all those against? Abstentions? It has been approved. Thank you. Sorry, my fingers are not with it today.
Sorry,
Councillor
can I just ask for clarification? I think there was 12 councillors voting then, and I think it was 6-5-1. What would have happened if it was 6-all?
It goes to the chair.
Eh?
It goes to the chair. Yeah.
Thought we might have had penalties or something like that.
If you're offering to be goalie, I'm sure there'll be a lot of takers tonight.
Don't put yourself in the spot, Brian.
Right. Let's be serious and move on. Wood End Mills. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This application relates to a currently sort of derelict site within a wider industrial estate at Wood End Mills in Lees, just to the southeast of Lees Town Centre, Lees District Centre rather. This is to give you the indication of the application site, and I'll show you some of the other slides. If you can see the area in red, as it extends out, it extends to the left towards South Hill. South Hill is a cul-de-sac which serves a small number of residential properties as well as the existing industrial estate, and where the red edge finishes, that's the extent to the public highway. Beyond that point, towards the kind of just centre right of this particular viewpoint, that area in red is the access through the private estate which the applicant has the right to use. So this is just the aerial of that to give it a, so roughly in the centre there where you can hopefully see the cursor moving, that's the area of the proposed building, which is, as I say, effectively a replacement of a previous building on the site. The rest of the estate is made up of a mix of uses. Many of those are also motor vehicle repair related type uses. So the proposal is effectively to construct a new building on the site, 2-storey in part, and this will primarily be a MOT come vehicle repair and maintenance area with associated reception area, and then an upper floor section which has a couple of potential uses, one of which will be ancillary to that vehicle repair use. So these are just some photographs quickly giving you the nature of the site itself. The area you can see on the left, so the kind of tarmacked area just to the right of the vehicle, that's the area which will pass the new building. So the new building frontage will be on that part of the site. Initially, you'll see in the report there were some concerns from the objector regarding vehicles emerging directly onto that area, and obviously they would emerge blindly and therefore cause conflict with the vehicles moving through the site. The scheme was amended to move that doorway exit so that there wouldn't be that direct relationship, and as you see, it's a fairly narrow route through that leads to that area, but we feel that that aspect has been resolved by the amendment. Again, these are just to give you an indication of the kind of character of the estate itself. So you can see there's parking in those various areas within the estate. Some of them are marked out for particular businesses, but generally it's not well defined between those areas. Again, these are areas just showing you the extent to the rear of the proposed unit, and particularly the one on the right hand side. What that's effectively showing you, again, a comment was made about some gates which currently exist. The car parking spaces for the new unit would be behind those gates, and quite clearly as that gate opens inwards, i.e. away from the camera, it would obstruct those spaces when that gate was open but the applicant has confirmed that they have control over those gates, and there is a condition recommendation that the gates are removed before the use commences. So there's some concerns from other businesses on there. Again, you'll see in the report concerns about competition, but as members will be well aware, competition not a planning consideration in these kinds of incidences. And also, for instance, customers may have to walk from the car parking spaces to the entrance reception area of the building. It's not segregated, but again, that would be equally the sole for other businesses on the site. And as you all know, if you were dropping your car off there, there's a requirement to be careful because you're on a working site. But when I've been on the site, yes, there are vehicles coming and going, but it's not constant through-flow. It's not considered that the arrangement that's proposed would cause a problem or a danger to users of the site. So as I say, it's redevelopment of a previous industrial building on an industrial estate site. Obviously it will bring new employment to those areas. It's a functional design, therefore it's appropriate on the site. There are residential properties at the access to the site on South Hill, but again at such a distance where activity from this building would not be likely to be really noticeable given the other activities on the site, and therefore it's recommended for approval subject to the conditions in the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any questions? No? We'll move on to the speaker. We have one speaker on the list, Mr. Rad Al-Hamdani.
Thank you, Chair. It was only if there were objections that I would offer clarification. I'm happy to go by the recommendations of the officer.
Thank you. Any questions for the speaker? No? Next, I suppose we'll open it up for discussion. Any questions? No? Move it. You'd like to move it? Move it. Anyone second? Yeah. Right, all those in favour? Against? Yep, I think that carries. Thank you very much. Right, moving swiftly on. Yes, well done, Mr. Hamdani, for staying this late. Thank you. Right, next we're jumping back to item number 8. Sorry.
Who moved it? Councillor Woodvine.
Woodvine and Councillor Charters seconded it, yeah. Item number 8, the Prudential Building in Coldust. I'll take it over to Graham.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, there are two applications here. I'm only doing one short presentation, you'll be pleased to know, for this application. So it's a full planning application and a listed building consent application, but essentially for the same development. So this is the Prudential Building on Union Street. I'm sure members know it well. It's been vacant for many, many years, falling into a state of disrepair. It is Grade 2 listed, so obviously trying to find a productive use for the building and obviously a renovation of the building to bring it back into positive use is basically the nature of the proposal. So essentially, once redeveloped, it will provide a kind of mixed shared workspace with associated facilities, so people working there, so it'll be a small cafe area and so forth within the building. So again, I'm sure all the members know this is the building itself, the one just in the middle now where the red arrow is positioned. Again, some more images, and these are really just showing you obviously the derelict state of the building, and you'll see shortly the interior of it as well. So again, it's in a poor, I've been inside the building, it's very poor state of repair, so obviously we need to try and find a productive use for the building. Very small scale this, so you won't be able, but what this effectively shows, the various workspaces, meeting rooms and so forth of various types, individual areas that are being proposed within the building. Now this one, probably the only issue really to concentrate on, from members will see from the report, there is an objection that's been submitted by a couple of the amenity bodies to some of the additions to the building, and these are the two additions. So if you look at the bottom right hand corner, these are a couple of dormers that are being erected on the frontage of the building. Now there are some other dormers on side elevations, but again the angle of the building, its relationship with neighbouring properties means that they will not be very prominent. The ones on the front of the building will be visible, as will this turret, which is like the top right hand side of the premises. So if I just move forward a little bit to that image, this is just an indicative image really. So again, it's to bring the building back into its substantive use and productive use. The issues that the amenity bodies have talked about are these dormers in the centre and these lanterns. But as you'll see from the report, there are existing, certainly there are existing very inappropriate dormers which are in a poor state of repair on the frontage, and also historically there were some larger structures on these areas, and in fact some turrets on these other areas on the corner which were obviously subsequently removed. Now the approach that's been taken is very contemporary, very modern, and it's an approach you often take because you don't try and mimic, oops, what have I done now? You don't try and mimic something historic, but you try and design it so that it reflects, here's a modern interpretation of that. And you'll see from the dormers, the scale of them, they reflect the windows below, the width of them does that. Similarly with the turrets, they bring in a bit of extra light into the building, and therefore they meet modern needs, and in meeting modern needs they provide the basis for a productive use that would work for the building itself whilst respecting the historic character of it. So whilst the two amenity bodies have objected, Historic England has not. So there's a range of opinions there, and certainly from your officer's point of view, bringing this building back into productive use is really important, and therefore if these introductions of more contemporary features allow that to come on, you have to weigh that balance. So in terms of interpretation of statutory responsibility, there will be less than substantial harm to the building, and that has to be weighed against public benefits, and the public benefits of this are quite clear to be seen. For that reason, both the planning application and the listed building consent are recommended for approval, and obviously you know, Chair, there'll need to be two separate decisions.
Yep, thank you for that, Graham. And just to clarify again, both the applications will need to be taken separately, so I open the floor to members to ask questions to officers. Councillor Akhtar.
Thank you, Chair. It's not a question, it's just an observation. In terms, I mean, personally I welcome this application. This particular building has been actually an eyesore to our town centre for many, many years, and it's a huge sort of development, and it's important for our town centre. And as the officer has outlined, personally I think those dormers and the turrets actually sort of blend quite well into the existing building, and in the artist's expression at the moment, they look really good, and like I said, they do blend in. So therefore I would like to move approval of the application.
Thank you. I've just got Councillor Charters and Holbin, so just quickly come in with you. Yeah.
I'm going to go completely the opposite way on what Councillor Akhtar just said on that last point. I too welcome the fact that we're bringing this building back into use, so God knows it is an eyesore. But I do sort of think that there is some merit in the response from the Victorian Society in the historic buildings and places. I mean, just off that artist's impression, this a very simple thing of coating the dormers and the lanterns to keep them in the same colour would be, I think the words that they're using here would be a subtler intervention, and I think that's a way we could do that, where it would alleviate those concerns while still keeping the character of the conservation area.
Graham?
It's an important point, but a point we often make is we're dealing with what is in front of us, and you might think there's something better, but unfortunately what we're looking at is that this is the proposal that's been put to us. Is it of itself unacceptable? And again, you know, you have to weigh that up against the other side of this, which is the benefits of bringing it forward. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Hoban, very quickly, please. Thank you.
I'm going to bat it back the other way, I'm afraid, Councillor Charles says, because if that's how it ends up looking, that building, that's going to be the eye of the sound centre, isn't it? That's a magnificent looking drawing, that. If it ends up like that, I think we need to get whoever's drawn that, the architect and the builder, to have a look at every other building in the town centre and see what they can do with them. I definitely second that.
I think this is the first we've got a cross-party consensus on that, so congratulations to everybody. Any other comments from any other members? Can I get someone to move? Yeah, moved. Sorry, Councillor Akhtar, seconded by Councillor Hoban. All those in favour? Yep. Thank you very much. And item number 9, which is again the same. So can we move straight to a vote? Does anyone like to
move straight to the vote?
Yep, I second that. All those in favour? Unanimous again. I can't say the word. Right. On the last Rutland Mill on Linney Lane, Shaw. Thank you.
Yeah, again, thank you, Chair. Similar to the application before the last one, this is a site on north side of Linney Lane, opposite the Shaw Distribution Centre site, which many of the members will know we granted planning permission for residential redevelopment on. But this particular site on the north side is occupied by another derelict building where I think there'd been a little tragedy with a child fairly recently, so obviously bringing a positive redevelopment of the site forward and removal of the existing building will be a positive. So it's the site in the centre there. This is the proposal for use of the site, so it's an L-shaped group of 4 industrial buildings which will front on, or rather back onto Linney Lane, with servicing down a shared access with neighbouring industrial units. As you'll see, there's an area for a turning circle for vehicles, a very large car parking area being provided within the site. Some trees will be removed as part of the development, but there's a scheme that's been put forward which the trees officer is satisfied with for replacement planting. Again, fairly functional building. It backs onto Linney Lane, but then again, given the residential scheme on the opposite side of Linney Lane, that's probably a positive, because what it means is all the activity, all the vehicle movements and so on, loading areas are screened from the future residents on the site. So this just give you an image. You can see on the right hand side the condition of the building as it stands at the moment. This is the access way which is shared with the neighbouring industrial units. So the existing access onto Linney Lane will be closed, so there's a benefit there as well of removing that access point. Again, just some more images of what the site actually looks like at present. And again, back to that presentation. So again, recommended for approval, subject to the conditions in the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Graham. Any questions for the officers? Councillor Gosser, yep. Pardon? Okay. Right, so we'll open up for floor discussion. Yep, Councillor Gloucester.
Yeah, it's my ward, Chair, and I'd just like to move approval. It's an insignificant disrepair and it does need something doing with it urgently. Thank you.
Second that, okay. All those in favour of Councillor Gloucester's? Yep. I think that's unanimous. Thank you, and that moves us on to appeals update.
Yep, this is just for noting as usual for members, and just to clarify that on the second page of it there are a couple of blank cells which should say ongoing, just if everyone's aware of that, because those appeals are still ongoing.
Do members note that? Yep. That concludes tonight's meeting. Thank you very much for your time and effort, and have a good evening meal. See you next time, guys. Bye.